Page 227 of The Unfolding is the story of Hope Reagan Harris.
I was so all in on work. I don't think I had the capacity to realize that I was so sucked in. You get adjusted with this lifestyle. The thought of stepping away from how much money I made felt really crazy. I was just crying out to God. I don't know what to do.
God's story has been unfolding.
Since the beginning of time.
He invites you to be a part of it.
Wow. Another page in The Unfolding.
Hey, this is Meredith Foster. There's something ironic about our tendency to believe if we just achieve or acquire one more thing, then we'll feel content. Hope Reagan Harris understands that there's always something dangling in front of us that seems to promise a happier life, something that tries to trick us into chasing the next big thing. As a rising star at a Fortune 500 company, Hope thrived on the thrill of getting the next promotion, the next pay raise, bigger house, better car. By the time she was 26, she was climbing the corporate ladder at a dizzying pace. Hope was so obsessed with moving ahead, she didn't realize her soul was getting left behind.
I grew up in a small town called Greenwood, Arkansas. Just a really, I would say, normal family. You know, my parents were married. I'm the oldest. Got a younger brother and a younger sister. Actually, two younger brothers, which I'll get into. Oldest child, we were going to church like Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. I mean, that was pretty much outside of like friends and school. That was like our thing. Yeah, my faith, I feel like I watched my parents' faith and I just never really had like a lot of questions when I was little. I love God, love Jesus. My mom, stayed at home with us. And that was something that she just really instilled in us, was just who Jesus was and what our faith meant to us. And then when I was actually going into the fourth grade, my mom, I remember it was like New Year's Eve, she found out she was expecting another baby. So it was going to be the fourth. And we were all like so excited. And, me being the oldest, I've always kind of had that like mothering character. My little brother, for instance, he's 7 years younger and he called me like Mama Hope growing up. Anyways, I was so expectant and excited for another baby. And then I remember probably 4 months into the pregnancy, my dad pulled me aside and was like, hey, something's wrong with the baby. We're just going to keep the pregnancy. Doctors are saying this isn't good news and we should just kind of give up on the baby, but we're not going to. And we believe that anything can happen. I didn't really totally understand at the time, but basically my youngest brother, his name was Gabe. He had Potter syndrome, which essentially means that you just are born without kidneys. So like everything else was fine except he didn't have kidneys. It was just like a very rare genetic condition. I remember, I believed. I was like, God's going to do it. Like it's going to be okay. Why would a bad thing happen? I just had that childlike faith. But then the day that my little brother was born, I remember my dad called our home phone. And so I ran to the home phone. I was so excited. He's like, hey, what we talked about happened. And so I, again, childlike faith, assumed everything was fine, only to arrive at the hospital realizing that I was way off and what we had talked about, the worst case scenario, had happened. And so I feel like that was really the moment where my faith kind of got a little bit, I wouldn't say rocky, but it was the first time at the age of 9, almost 10, where I'm like, man, who is God? Like I'm a little bit confused, everything that I had once believed or just knew to be true isn't playing out. And so I think that was probably the first time I was exposed to like the world, per se, that like bad things do happen and they don't always make sense. I just kept going to church. Like there really was another option. My parents, I think they did a great job of I'm sure there was a lot of like struggles they went through in their marriage and things like that, but they did a good job of like kind of separating that. And that wasn't something we were involved in. And so, yeah, I would say my faith continued to grow. It was very much so my parents' faith. And then what really changed it all for me was in high school. My dream from probably shortly after Gabe passed away, my grandparents told me about this just beautiful, amazing college called Pepperdine University on the beach in Malibu, California. What's crazy is they actually grew up in California. And when they found out they were pregnant with my mom, they moved to Arkansas for like a better family life and more, more affordable and things like that. They grew up, kind of in Orange County, LA area. And so they were very familiar with Pepperdine. And so actually it's funny. They told me about Pepperdine one day when I was sitting in the church pew waiting for church to start. And I was like, that's where I want to go. Like, again, childlike faith, didn't understand that school is literally $70,000 a year. My parents are educators. I didn't mention that. They worked for the school that I went to and had the childlike faith that I was going to go to Pepperdine. Well, then in high school, kind of the reality of that set in. I remember being a senior in high school in my English class, and like the counselor had visited our class and we were just talking about college and kind of like some prep work. And they went around the room and they're like, everyone share, like, where you want to go to college? And I remember saying Pepperdine and people behind me literally laughing. And I was like, ooh, okay. I'm a big dreamer, And so I think that was the first time where I'm like, yeah, this really isn't like attainable. Like, this isn't going to happen. I had kind of given up on the dream my senior year. I mean, I applied and everything. And once the financial aid came back the way it did, it was definitely not going to be affordable for my family. And so my parents were just kind of realistic with me, like, hey, this isn't really affordable. There's some other options. And we had boiled it down to Arkansas Tech, which was probably like 2 hours from my house. So I had a college roommate. It was one of my best friends. We played soccer together. My high school boyfriend was actually already there. He was a year older, and that was going to be my life. I was probably going to marry the guy, kind of had the next 4 years set. Everything was just like, okay, this is what I'm walking into. This is my plan. And 8 days before college started, my mom called Pepperdine and was like, hey, we need a withdrawal hopes application. And they had told my parents, we'd kind of explained the situation to them. And they were like, yeah, if you go ahead and put down your deposit, we will refund you. Like, if Hope can't come. Because it was a lot of money. It was like, like $600 just to basically put your name down saying you're going to go. And so my mom called to get her deposit money back. And they were like, wait. Donors have given Hope a full tuition scholarship. Does that change things for y'all? I'll never forget, I was babysitting Meredith and my mom called and I'm like, that's kind of weird. So I remember answering. She's like, you're never going to believe what just happened. I'm like, what? And she had told me leading up to this, like, there had been some weird coincidental moments that kind of felt like God winks. Like, for instance, she had been in New York at a conference and this random family decked out in Pepperdine came and sat the table next to her where she was eating. There were some weird moments where God was kind of like, hold on, I had known those moments, but when she told me that, I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, God. I knew it was God. I mean, I had prayed about it. I think this is how kind God is. He is so kind to pursue us and work behind the scenes, even when we've given up or even when we're just like, okay, this is the plan. Like, we're content with the plan. We're okay with the plan. I laugh now because I was like, I was in a huge season of waiting and I didn't even know I was in a season of waiting. But yeah, I was like, man, this has to be God. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, oh, shoot. The thing that I've prayed for and wanted and like dreamed of, maybe I dreamed of it because I didn't think it would actually happen and I wouldn't actually have to move like 1,800 miles away from my family. I mean, I'd only been married to California once in the 6th grade. I'd never even stepped foot on Malibu's campus. I mean, I knew no one. I've always gone to my dad for kind of the moments where it feels like a fork in the road and you're like, man, what do I do? I remember going to him and I knew I had to go. Like, if God had made a way, I'm like, gosh, I got to go. Like, I can't miss this opportunity that he has so clearly paved. But I remember going to my dad, I'm so scared. I don't know anyone. I really hadn't talked about it with my high school boyfriend or my best friend because it just seemed like a pipe dream at that point. I mean, they had known at one point, but they probably also laughed about it. I mean, they were awesome, but they were probably like, Hope you're crazy, So I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to lose my friends. My boyfriend's probably going to break up with me, all these things. And my dad was just like, Hope, if I was 18 at your age, like, yes, I'd be scared to death. Like, this is a normal human reaction of like leaving your family, going to California, which seems crazy to a little small town Arkansas girl. But he was like, I would have gone. Like, you don't want to lay in bed at night when you're 40. Like, why didn't I just do it? Why didn't I just go for it? And so I went for it. My boyfriend broke up with me. All the things that I thought would happen happened. But that was really the moment where it was like, okay, it's me and God. Like, I really had to rely on him for strength. I really had to rely on him for just guidance. I mean, it was a whole new place. I remember the culture shock of getting to California. I mean, I remember walking around Santa Monica and people just weren't friendly. And I literally started crying because I'm like, this isn't the South anymore. Like, where am I? What am I doing? And yeah, it's been a journey, but God has been so faithful and he's just met me in my doubting. He's met me in my waiting. He's met me in, all different seasons of life. And it's just been so cool to see how his plans really are so much better, than ours.
Having God show up, did that change your relationship with him?
Yeah, I would describe it as there's always been things that I'm constantly working out with him. It was one of those moments where I feel like for the first time, I'd really seen him come through in a way that I had not seen him come through for. It's kind of one of those like Moses moments where I'm like, that was my Red Sea. Like Pepperdine was my Red Sea. There was no way I was going to get there, and he just, anonymous donors, crazy, it just happened. But I would say once I got to Pepperdine, that was when my faith went to the next level where it was like, okay, this is my faith, but it's almost figuring out like, what is my faith going to look like? For 18 years, I had amazing examples, right? But I almost so great that I was able to lean on their faith, for my faith. And so it was for the first time of like, okay, do I want to go to church on Sunday? Like that. But I would really say probably one of the harder years of my life was my sophomore year. After being at Pepperdine for a year, when you're there, your freshman year, pretty much as soon as you get on campus, they're like, okay, where are you going to study abroad the next year? And so I'm like, guys, I just got to Malibu. But it's the way of Pepperdine. Like your sophomore year, you study abroad. So probably around like September, October, and I just got there at the end of August, I had already made the decision that I was going to go live in Lausanne, Switzerland the next year. That's really where my faith took a whole next level. I noticed a lot of things during that time when I was away. I mean, it was definitely depressing at times because, I was also the resident advisor. So that meant I was responsible for leading my peers spiritually, leading my peers from even like a discipline standpoint, which is so awkward. Living in a home with people who also they want to live their lives and you can kind of put a stick in that. So it was a very interesting perspective. And I feel like it was the first year that I was just really lonely, more lonely than I'd even been in Malibu because I had made some really like close friends pretty quickly. But when I went to study abroad, it was like, man, I'm here with these 70 people. And so all of my peers are having this hard time. And then all of these things were getting brought up in me with like my childhood. And I also started dating right before I went abroad. My now husband, he was playing baseball in Oklahoma. I was in Switzerland. Like that was our first year dating. So there's just a lot going on, but it was just a really cool year from the standpoint of, I feel like I really learned who God was. I feel like I really learned, wow, he's so big because every single weekend I was hopping on a plane or a train and I was going to a new country because we had 3-day weekends. So I think I traveled, it was like 23 countries in a year. It was crazy. But I think at that point I realized how big God was and how much he loved his people because everywhere I went, I just saw this different flair of God and this creativity. And from the landscaping, I was living in the Swiss Alps, but then I would like one weekend, like went to Morocco and saw that landscaping. And it was just so cool. I feel like it was that year as I was really hitting some of the harder spots in my heart and just maybe dealing with some of the trauma, but he was healing me in other ways of, man, I'm so much bigger than this like one thing that happened in your life. Look what I'm doing and look at me. So yeah, I feel like that was me kind of just learning his characteristics. But then after college, I kind of not lost faith, but I did what everyone else did, which is graduate and enter into a job. I was the girl who didn't even know what a Fortune 500 was in college. I was from a town of 10,000. There weren't Fortune 500s around us. But then I learned about it and I'm like, ooh, I make a lot of money. My family didn't always have a lot. We kind of did struggle some. My mom didn't work until my youngest brother Hunter went to school. So she didn't work for like 18 years. And we lived on my dad's like coaching salary for a while. Things were tough. So I was like, I have been offered this opportunity and I've got this resume and I've been to these places. Like I need to make the most of it. And so I'd always had a lot of pressure on myself being the oldest and my parents working at the school district, right? I mean, I feel like graduating college, it was like, okay, I can go do what I want to do. The world is my oyster here. I have seen how big the world is. I have seen how big God is. Let's just go.
So did you picture yourself Fortune 500 career? Is that what you thought you were going to do?
Yeah. I mean, I seriously, Will and I, my husband, we were talking yesterday because I was just like, I feel so different than who I once was. He was like, yeah, but I feel like, 3 years ago, if I told you were going to be the CEO of Walmart in 2 years, you would have believed me. But that was like the stuff my mentors were like feeding me. That was my environment. And we were kind of cracking up about it because I'm like, yeah, it's so silly now and so meaningless now to me with how different my life is. That was the reality of my life.
What was your first job?
So my husband actually worked for the FBI and we got married out of college. So we moved to DC and he was working for the FBI and I was working for, it's a Fortune 500. It's called Gartner Inc. So that was my first job, but we were only in DC for, it's probably about 11 months because when I was in college, my senior year, we didn't really know, like Will and I were going to get married. But, during that last semester of senior year, like we're trying to figure out, okay, we're getting married. Where are we moving? What are our jobs going to be? during this time frame, I share that to say, like, I had thought I would probably go back and work for Walmart. I had become pretty close with the CFO of Walmart at the time. His daughter was going to go to Pepperdine. He was really trying to help me get my foot in the door at Walmart. And Walmart is it's actually where we live now. We live in Walmart country. We're in Bentonville, Arkansas. But, it was about 2 hours from where I grew up. And so that felt like a good, middle ground working, for the largest company in the world, but also being close to home. And so I kind of thought that's where I would end up. And then last minute, Will ended up getting like the opportunity in DC for the FBI. And so we were like, we can't turn that down. With that being said, I had kept my connections at Walmart. And so about 10 months into working in DC, Will and I had kind of gotten this itch of like, we're in a 500 square foot apartment. We're not making much money because it was, it's an entry level. And in DC, that's where a lot of young people start. And so someone reached out to me from Walmart, and he had heard about me like through the CFO and different people, and he wanted me to lead like an entire team. And I mean, I'm 22, right, Meredith? Like, I'm teeny. And I never will forget, I drove Will's truck for the first time I'd ever driven Will's truck in DC to go to my interview. I'll never forget. His name's Jake. He was like, okay, so, there's this team that I'm wanting you to lead. What's your leadership experience? And I remember being like, well, I was a resident advisor in college. I mean, it was awesome. I mean, but he didn't blink. I look back at my younger self, and it's funny. I just had this like confidence. I look back and I do see God in it. All of these experiences that I did have, he intended for me to have them, right? And like, he gave me the confidence. I look back and I'm like, I'm 30 now and I don't have that much confidence. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can lead a team of, in Meredith, most of these people, probably the closest in age gap, I'm 22, was probably a 35-year-old. Like, that was the youngest on my team. It was a time for sure. But I look back and it's like, man, God did give confidence. I had just gotten off this high of seeing all he could do and all he had done in the world, and, him just paving this way and making all these things happen. And I just had the confidence. I was like, yeah, I'm ready. Like, I've been an RA. Why couldn't I lead this team of people? Why not? And so anyways, yeah, that was kind of started though. I felt like once I got into Walmart, I was making more than Will and I were making together in DC. And so I feel like that's when things kind of shifted. It was like, I actually had promoted at my company in DC, like in the 10 months I was there, I think 3 or 4 times. And that kind of set like an unrealistic expectation of just promotions and money. And I mean, it's exciting when you graduate. You're like, I have money. Like, this is, it's just a new thing and it's exciting. And so, but I know when I got to Walmart, I think it's the company with the most millionaires from a salary perspective. And so I'm just looking around and I'm like, oh, I can, I've got that 22-year-old confidence. I'm like, oh, I'll be CEO in like, 10 years. Give me 10 years. So, I mean, I think, Meredith, that's when I kind of went into this spiritual battle happening in my life, because I was still going to church. My faith was still important. I mean, that was still a thing. But I feel like that was when I definitely started idolizing more. Whoa, I'm making money. And the harder I work, and maybe the more I am a chameleon and not true to myself, the more money I make. This is awesome. It was almost like a game to me. Honestly, I think I found it really fun. And when I go all in on something, I go all in. And I worked for Walmart almost 6 years. It was just like promotion, bigger teams, bigger responsibilities. At one point, like before COVID, I was traveling to Canada every single month, India, China, first class, I mean, and at that point, yeah, I was like 26. And then I would see my paycheck come in, and I went from not even having a car when Will and I first got married to like my first car being a little Chevy Cruze, to my next car being an Audi, to my next car being a Mercedes. It was just crazy, it was just unheard of, unthinkable for me from my environment that I grew up in and what I had seen possible. And then even like the homes Will and I were buying, wow, this house is so much money. I would never double, triple what my childhood home was. Like, this is just crazy.
I think sometimes when you think, oh, if I make X amount and I get that, then I'll be happy. I'm just curious if there was a contentment with it, or did you have that drive every time you achieved something? Was there always something more?
Oh, there was always something more, always. And I think that was the hardest part, because for me, I look back at it and I kind of talk about this in Now or Next, because actually the whole book is really about what we're talking about right now, like going from being climbing to my descent off this corporate ladder. But for me, I think it was more about my worth. It wasn't that it was the salary. Like I loved coming home and telling Will, like I got a 20% increase with this much more bonus and this much more stock. Like I loved doing that and telling him that. But I think what I loved more was the praise that came with it and the acknowledgement and the recognition. I was working so much, I didn't even have time to spend like the money. I didn't go out and buy like a lot of fancy things. I just was working. Even when I would get home I was working. It wasn't now I can go on this trip. It was more so like, oh, I achieved this level. Okay, can I go to this new height? For me, it was like achieving the next and like proving to others and myself that I could.
When you're working like that, I can sort of guess what relationship with God was like, but what was it like?
Yeah, no, it was still a part of my life. I definitely would just say it was interesting because in some areas of my life, I remember when I was leading those teams, but I would always try to make a point to share like that I went to church and like I wanted them to know there was something different about me. But I wasn't all in. I was all in on work. I wasn't all in on making him known. I wanted him known. And it's just like I've said, like God is so kind of meet us where we are. And at that point in my life, I was just kind of warming up to like showing that I'm different, but I didn't really want to be different enough that like I maybe didn't get the promotion. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I was. Will is such a man of faith. He would constantly always make sure we're in church. Like that was something that we still very involved in. I just was so all in on work. I don't think I had the capacity or even the ability to realize that I was so sucked in to work, if that makes sense. It's almost like this delusion. And I look back and it's just like, if you had told me Walmart is like the entire world, I would have seriously thought that it was the entire world. Like that was how engrossed I was into just what I was doing. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I mean, I look back at it and it's like, yeah, you're making like great money, but you're literally like on call and you're not like a doctor saving lives. And I remember even like working, and peers, would vent to me and be like, we're not doctors. Like, why is our boss always calling us at blah, 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 blah. But for me, I was just like, this feels like I am saving things and doing things. I guess when you're in it, there's probably two ways you can look at it. You can really just see it for what it is, or you see it like you drink the Kool-Aid and you believe that it is so much more than it is. Like there's only two ways to do it, I think.
So how long were you on that hamster wheel?
Yeah, so this is what's interesting is Will and we knew we wanted kids, and I had kind of always prolonged it just because I knew the type of mom that I wanted to be. I knew that I wanted to be like available, present. I wanted to be very engaged. I wanted to have energy. I wanted to be hands-on. And I knew with the way that I was living, bringing a baby into the world was going to change things. I was going to have to change to be a mom. We waited until we had been married 5 years. And we finally decided, okay, we had gotten to the point where we were like, we have all this money, all these things, but like our life just still felt, kind of empty. And so we got pregnant with my daughter, Remy, who's almost 2 now, really, really fast. And I remember when I got pregnant with her, I had just stepped into a position at the company that had promised me like a promotion pretty fast. I had came over laterally, which just means like the same level. And they were like, hey, we just need you to get a little bit of experience under you in this area. It was the membership space. And then, you'll promote pretty quickly. So I had announced that I was pregnant. And then when I started having conversations about my career shortly after that, the conversation started going much differently. They handled it, the company, all the things. It was after I was on maternity leave when a lot of it got handled. But pretty much my entire pregnancy, I was facing a lot of hard stuff at work where things that had been promised were no longer possible or being told that were no longer possible. Once again, I feel like God knew that if I hadn't gone through something like that, like he had to take me through some really hard things for me to like really lose the sparkle and the ladder had, the corporate ladder had. Like I really had to be he had to disenchant me with the climb to the point that I was like, this is dumb. I guess I probably announced my pregnancy when I was like 2.5, 3 months pregnant. So like the whole last 6 months of my pregnancy working was just really hard. I'll never forget right before maternity leave was coming up, someone else kind of knew about the situation that was going on. And I mean, Meredith, I honestly just knew I couldn't go back into that same situation because at that point, it hadn't been clear that anything was going to change with leadership. I didn't really know, like, I knew the company was handling it, but everything's very slow when there's problems involved. And so I just went through my whole pregnancy. It honestly was very stressful. Like I was even induced early because of the high blood pressure that I was experiencing from the stress of the situation. Right before maternity leave, I talked to this lady and she had a promotion on her team and she had encouraged me to apply for the role. And she was like, let's just apply. We'll try to get you, before you leave, if you got the role or not. That way you kind of know like what you'd be coming back into. Because at this point, I'm telling them like, guys, I don't even know if I'm going to come back here. Like this is just, I've spent 5.5 years here and like, this is what's going down. Like this, I've given everything to this company and I go to one department that doesn't know me from Adam and this is what happens. Like, this is crazy. And I was really trying to fight like as much as I could, like not in a like aggressive way, but just like I was trying to tell my mentors, I was trying to like get help. Like I felt so stuck and hopeless. And anyway, so I applied for this role and I remember writing in my prayer journals. From the time this started happening is when I really started going to God. I remember it was at this point, I'm telling you, every day I'm on my face almost every day. I'm like, Lord, this baby, what are you going to have me do in motherhood? Lord, please provide. At this point, you get adjusted and acquainted with a certain amount of like this lifestyle. And like the thought of me stepping away from how much money I made, that also just felt really irresponsible and crazy. And it was just a really hard spot. It was like, man, like I know what I feel called to, but I don't know what to do. And so anyways, it was like every day. And I remember like my prayer journal during this time, this is when I really started prayer journaling. So I would like be writing out every single prayer. And it's crazy looking back. I was just crying out to God. I don't know what to do. I'm in this situation. And so anyways, apply for the role. There was really no answer during all of my pregnancy. I go into work. I lunch, go into an appointment. I'm 38 weeks pregnant. My blood pressure again, was really, really high. And my doctor's like, Hope, we need to deliver the baby tonight. This is not good. Your blood pressure is just through the roof. You are beyond stress. My doctor knew what was happening because I was just trying to explain. I have the baby, Remy, my daughter. Oh my gosh, she's incredible. It was such a crazy moment for me because it was like I was at work that morning. In the office. Lunch, I go in for an appointment. And by like 8:00 that night, I'm in the hospital getting induced. I was just thrown into motherhood, thrown out of corporate world and thrown into motherhood. And I'll never forget, I remember, driving a little Mercedes to work, blasting Christian music. And like, I was actually praying out loud a lot in the morning on the way to work. I would be praying like, Lord, just use me. I was actually on a team with a lot of non-believers. And I was actually really like, I was hosting little Bible studies before work on certain days. I was really starting to be all in on God. Like I was getting there, And it was funny as I'm getting closer with God, I'm losing interest in this corporate world. I'm just like seeing it for what it is. But 5-6 weeks, I don't remember the exact time frame after. And I had prayed to God, okay, Lord, if you don't want me back at Walmart, shut the door for the promotion. So it was the same day, I'll never forget, that I found out I had postpartum depression. Because I think I had just been really depressed. I had just walked through so much, so fast, so much change. Very traumatic. And I don't mean traumatic as in like, it was just like, for me, it was traumatic. It was a lot. I remember getting a text from a peer saying, hey, the hiring manager for this position, the one I had applied for, recommended that I reach out to you for interview advice and has encouraged me to apply for the role. Are you kidding me? I'm not crazy or stupid. I understand that means I probably didn't get the job.
Wow.
Yeah, I was shocked because the hiring manager had just honestly made it seem like I was just shoo-in. And then I remember it was like 2 weeks later, so I'm probably 8 weeks postpartum. She's like, I just want to let you know that they're announcing tomorrow that I got the job. And I'm like, oh my gosh. It was like the next day, I was driving up this hill kind of by our house. I don't remember where I was even going, but I was just like, Lord, just like you sent Samuel to find David, which if you need a refresher, like I mostly always do. Basically, David was out in a pasture just being a shepherd to sheep. Samuel came to Jesse, David's dad, and was like, hey, I'm trying to find the next king of Israel. Jesse put every single son in front of Samuel except David. And Samuel's like, okay, none of these guys are it. Do you have any more sons? And he's like, oh yeah, like the little one tending the sheep. And then in comes David and then he's anointed. And so I was just like, Lord, I'm done striving. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is insane. I'm willing to walk away from all of this, but I need you to send someone.
Hope was desperate for an answer, for direction. Her maternity leave was ending soon. What was she supposed to do? She prayed that God would send someone, and he did.
No joke, Meredith, 3 years prior, when COVID had hit, I had reached out to YouVersion, the Bible app, about a job there. I had always just been interested in YouVersion because like my love for technology and stuff, like the things that I did at Walmart were very similar. Their product management with like different software and stuff. I'm like, how cool would it be to like enhance the Bible app? So I had reached out 3 years before, but then when I started actually like thinking about doing it, the reality of it just was like, okay, I'm gonna have to move. I'm gonna like take a 50%, over 50% pay cut. Like this doesn't seem like I want to do it. So I'd stayed in touch with him. His name's Ben. And he reached out to me literally that same afternoon with the email subtitle, coming to Bentonville, Arkansas.
Coming to your hometown?
Yes. So Meredith, it was so crazy. Long story short, like the rest is history. I ended up literally in time to give Walmart a 2-week notice. So like a Friday afternoon. And then I'd have to give them the notice on Monday, like that I was not coming back after maternity leave, like to give them the fair 2-week notice. I found out and totally finished the interview process with YouVersion on that Friday, right in time to tell them on Monday that I'm no longer going to come back. Got a job. I took a 50% pay cut. I knew it was God. It was one of those things where it wasn't like the Pepperdine where I'm like getting a lottery ticket with, like, whoa, but it was a lottery ticket because it was like a dream job doing something that I was so passionate about, something I was so excited about with a company I had dreamt of, and I got to do it remotely. So I had like the flexibility where I could drop Remy off at daycare at like 9:30, you know what I mean? And I could go get her earlier in the afternoon. It was like the best of both worlds, I would say. I did that. Loved it. It was amazing. Gosh, I feel like, again, God so kind of meet us where we are. There was so much healing that happened there where people were calling out in me my giftings, but not just like for the work that I do, but just like things in me. And then, they would cheer me on the days where Remy had to join our Zoom calls because she was sick from daycare. And they would cheer me on when I was in person, crushing it. Like it was just one of those things where I am like loved as a whole human being here. And I started realizing corporate could look different, you know what I mean? And so that was great until I guess right around Remy's first birthday. So about a year ago, I started feeling this kind of nudge that maybe God was calling me to stay at home full time. I really just started having this desire to be with Remy all the time. My mom stayed at home, but I just kind of felt like I had found a good rhythm and that I had found like the best possible scenario to be a working mom, but also be the present available mom that I wanted to be and have the flexibility that I needed and all of that. And so I was like, what is this desire coming from? Like, this is so interesting. What in the world? I remember telling Will, and Will's like, Hope, we've already lost over $100,000 of your salary. You're like now wanting to lose the last bit that you have. What in the world? Like, we've already changed our lifestyle around. We've already, made some sacrifices to make this work. This is working. What do you mean? That's when I just started praying, Lord, if this is what you want us to do, you're going to have to make a way because like we're looking at the numbers and like this just doesn't make sense. I think we were actually thinking we were going to lose like $200 or $300 a month if I quit. Like it was kind of one of those, and Will has a great job. Like he actually does work corporate as well. Yeah. So having these desires, praying about it. And no joke, my in-laws were going to start a daycare franchise. It was the same daycare franchise Remy was in. They live here. There's daycares everywhere. That's like a normal thing. Like it's like owning a McDonald's. Someone else is going to put up another McDonald's. Like that's it. Their goal is to expand. Well, the franchise owners of the one that Remy was in going to every single day, they didn't maybe quite understand when you have a franchise that other people open up franchises. So they confronted me about a month later when my in-laws are going through this process and cornered me while I dropped my daughter off at school, telling me that this was a kick in the face, all these really weird things. And I'm like, okay, this is very left field. I'm very confused. It turns out they ended up kicking her out of school. So here I am, but Will and I knew, okay, Lord, you're calling Hope to stay at home. It was so clear. The Lord can use your daughter getting kicked out of school to make it so clear. And every time I tell the story, I'm like, Remy did nothing behavioral wise. She was one. There was promise. You didn't even have teeth to bite. This girl was not a behavioral thing. It was a competition, then problem. But God can use anything, right? And so I had gotten a Yukon, it upgraded from a Mercedes to a Yukon. We sold it on Facebook Marketplace. I'm still sharing a used truck with my husband, Will. It's been almost a year now, and we just made it work. We at one point thought we were going to have to sell our house, and then crazy story, ran into a colleague that was in town from New York that I used to work at Walmart, and she told me about how I could recast my mortgage rather than refinancing, and we had put down a random chunk of money the year before, and we got our payment down just by a phone call. down $1,000 a month just from running into her. It just, only God. You know what I mean? Only God. And he uses it all. I mean, he used a colleague that I knew that was in town from New York that was randomly at the same Chick-fil-A me and my daughter were at in Rogers, Arkansas, telling me about recasting my home. It's God. He's got me. And I mean, I could go on and on about just what he's done and what he's done since I've been a stay-at-home mom and all the things. But I just know when you're walking with God, like there's no such thing as missing out. And I think the descent is often harder than the climb because you're like, okay, what if I regret this? What if I want to go back and I can't? What if this is a mistake? What if, you don't know, you have all these what ifs, but God is just really gently reminding me, if I'm calling you back to corporate America, like, don't you think I'm going to open that door? If I want you back at YouVersion, don't you think it'll happen? You know, there's just so many things. And I was kind of grieving a little bit yesterday because I told Will, I was like, sometimes I miss my old life. I miss working on these fun, exciting things, but I cling to this. When I was leaving YouVersion, I had a fellow working mom, you know, she was a working mom, but she came up to me and she's like, Hope, I just want to let you know that if God is calling you to leave a job that is impacting millions upon millions of lives every single day, to stay at home with your daughter, how much more important is that assignment right now? I was like, yeah. So for whatever reason, I have to remember that. And my friends remind me of that constantly. The assignment of raising Remy and focusing on my family right now has to be so great because he's called me out of all these other things. And I'm just learning like what we think things should look like, or to be important or to be most important or priority is so different than what God views. If you're listening and you're feeling a nudge to make a change, whether that is going back to work, quitting work, or moving, or going to an apartment and saving money and selling your home, or downgrading your car, whatever that looks like, if you feel like, man, I've peaked, or man, I'm at like this high point, like there is not a higher point than like being locked in step and in alignment with the Lord. I promise you that. And I've seen that. I have the lease that I've had. Like I've even sold a Louis Vuitton this year to help fund this nonprofit that's randomly been birthed during me being a stay-at-home mom, that I'm sending postcards out to women around the world. There was no greater joy than getting the $1,500 in cash to go put towards postage. God is just so good through it all. He was good when I got a full ride scholarship to Pepperdine, and he was good when my daughter got kicked out of school.
Oh, it's such a good story. I want to talk about this nonprofit you've started, the book. Can you tell me about how they came about?
Yeah, no, so it's been so crazy, Meredith. Before I was ending my time at YouVersion, I had another book like deal already planned, pre-planned. Even when I was at Walmart, I knew I was going to have this other book that was coming February 2025. And I first thought it was going to be a book on fear. And before even knowing all of this stuff was going on, I felt like the Lord really refined it and was like, just kind of gently nudged me through the Holy Spirit and like what I was reading and what people were talking to me about, that it needed to be on the fear of missing out. Not even knowing I was about to experience like the most amount of fear of missing out. It was perfect. Like God wrote the book for me. I was able to just share basically everything we've talked about on the podcast is in that book, but there's a lot of biblical scripture and reflective questions and a lot more detail, right? So if you're in a place where like you're ready to take it to the next step in your faith and you want to just embrace where God has you now, whether that's in working at Starbucks or being in corporate America or being a stay-at-home mom folding laundry, this is the book for you. And so I'm really excited and passionate about the message. And then kind of crazy story, around the time that I had finished the book, or at least the first draft, I just randomly posted an Instagram reel on my heart asking who wanted Christian encouragement, and it went viral. I thought like 40 people would want a card from me, and I literally planned to write like 40 cards. I had a stack of Dayspring cards that they had given me because they're great partners of mine. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll just like buy some stamps and send these out. Well, over 26,000 women later across 110 countries. And so, yeah, I have this full-blown nonprofit. God's doing a lot in my heart. I first thought I needed like $50,000 for this year. And then I started looking through like what we really needed. And I like unsubscribed to my like blue check mark on Instagram. And like I've cut back a lot of cost. And I'm like, yeah, we really just need $6,500. Like that is so doable, God. You can do that. And so anyways, we're sitting right now just to fund it for next year. Dayspring donated 20,000 postcards. So we're going to be able to impact 20,000 girls this year. And we've got 23 ambassadors from around the world signed up, and they're hosting postcard parties in Taiwan, South Africa, New Zealand. I mean, it's pretty crazy, Meredith. And I look at all this and I'm just like, oh my God, because I am a stay-at-home mom with very limited time. This is only him, so he's got me in a place now where I know my place. I know my role. It's exciting. I'm excited and expectant just for what he's got next. And especially for this book. This is my third book, but I feel most passionate about this message. I just think it's raw, it's real, and it's just, if you're walking a Christian life, this is something you're going to walk through.
The book is called Now Over Next, Conquering the Fear of Missing Out. Hope says it's a book that helps you enjoy the abundant life that God has given you today, rather than scramble to find the satisfaction the world offers, but never delivers. You can find it on Amazon. And as Hope mentioned, she founded the Purpose Doesn't Pause movement, where 26,000 women from more than 100 countries have signed up for a free handwritten card with Christian encouragement. You can sign up to receive a card or learn about hosting a party to write cards for women around the world at purposedoesn'tpause.org. To learn more, look for Hope Reagan Harris on Instagram and Facebook. Huge thanks to Hope for sharing her story. Thanks to the Unfolding team, Lindsay Caparoon, Michael Shermack, our producer and network director, Jason Rackow. We'll be back next week with another page of The Unfolding.